Welcome back to Blender Frenzy. I am Justin, and we are continuing the quarantine series. This is the second video of our normal maps. So in the first video, I explained what a normal map was and what effect it has on our object, creating that bumpy looking texture with the lighting and the shadows. And then we created a plane with a whole bunch of geometry so that we could offset that geometry in a displacement map. And this displacement map is what we're going to use to generate our normal map. So now we're going to start again right where we left off from last time. So I'm going to go over two ways to generate these normal maps. The first one is the lazy way, and the second way is the proper way. So the first one is pretty cool, the lazy way or fast way, and it's thanks to Assembly of Knowledge here 3 years ago almost, or 2.5 years ago. This is for Blender 2.7 something, but it still works the same way. So I would highly recommend going checking this out. But I'm going to go over this anyway. So I just wanted to give him a shout out because I thought this method was pretty useful. So let's go over that one first. I'm going to stay in solid shaded mode, but I'm going to come to the drop down, choose matte cap for the lighting, and then click the sphere, and then choose this normal map sphere. And ta-da! We have generated a normal map. And so what you can do is come over here to view, and then view render image or viewport render image. And boom, we have rendered our viewport image. And essentially what we've done is just taken a screenshot of the viewport. Now I didn't actually realize this was possible until I watched this video from this guy. So, and you can see it is a true snapshot because we've got the origin little button there, which we don't want. So we're gonna have to clean this up a little bit, but that's essentially how you do it. But we're going to have to get rid of that origin, and we're going to have to line up our camera to fit our object here. So close that, and let's come up to view again, and then go to align view, and then center view to cursor. That's going to be important. So come back up to view, and then align view again, and align active camera to view, or you can use the shortcut. Okay, now that snaps the camera to your current view, and we're now in camera perspective mode. So let's select our camera. We can select it by clicking on the camera border here. You can also click it up here in the outliner. And let's come down to our camera properties, and where it says type perspective, change that to orthographic. Now that looks like it shrinks it, but basically it's just getting rid of all perspective. It's completely two-dimensional. Now we have to set the orthographic scale here. And the number we need to put here needs to match the size of our square plane here. So I'm going to select our plane, N to open up our transform and item tab. And down here under dimensions, you see that at the X and the Y, we have 2 meters by 2 meters. That is our orthographic scale. So if we come back to our camera and then type 2 here, the sides line up now. The tops and the bottoms don't line up yet because we have to go to our output and change our resolution. Now I know that this image originally was a 512 by 512 resolution, so I'm just going to type 512 here, and now our camera boundaries line up exactly with our plane object. And the last thing I'm going to do before I render is turn off our overlays so we don't see any sort of origin points or highlights or anything. It's just the normal texture here. Go up to view, viewport, render image, and boom, now we have another image that's just of the square plane with all of our normal map coloring on it. So we just save this image out as a copy, and I'm going to title this TP normal, not normal, normal viewport. Enter, and you can save it as a PNG or JPEG. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to save it as a JPEG. So there you go. That is normal map number 1. The lazy way, quick way. Now it might not be needed for the 512 by 512 image, but if you had an image that was a huge resolution and you needed a normal map really quick, this is probably the way you would want to do it. But if you want to know how to do it the proper way to do it is to bake this into a texture using cycles. Now, so far we've been using Eevee, which was working well enough for what we did, but we need to change this to cycles for baking because Eevee doesn't have bake option as of yet, as of 2.82. So come down here to bake and scroll down, and you can see we have these bake options. But in order to bake, we need to actually have a material to bake to. So let's go over to our shading tab, go into camera mode here. Let's select our object and then either click on new material, or I know that there's a material created already, so I'm just going to click on this one. Now I actually don't want any of these, so I'm just going to select all of those and just delete those. And now we can see this bright purple pinkish texture, and that just means that there is no material applied to this at all. So it's kind of like a little warning like, hey, no material. But I don't care because I don't want a material for this. I actually just want to collect the normal information and bake it onto another image. So what I need to do is add in a texture, image texture, and then we're going to make this a new texture. I'm just going to type in placeholder like I usually do. That's going to be 512 by 512, and then no alpha needed, and okay. So here is our placeholder. So over here, I'm just going to extend this out just a little bit more so we can see it a bit better. Just going to select our placeholder and scroll out. There we go. So now let's go back to our render properties, down to bake, open that up here. And for the bake type, I don't want combined. I actually just want to change this to normal. And then for the influence, I'm going to keep the space at tangent. I'm actually going to keep everything else the same. Margins are same, clear image, all of this stuff is good. So before I choose bake, I just got to make sure that my object is selected and that the node, our texture node, is selected. So both of these need to be selected, and now I can just hit bake. And now you can see over here, we have our normal map baked onto our placeholder image. And so I just need to save this as a copy, and we can select this one. And then I'm just going to change this to bake and change this to JPEG and save that out. Okay, so let's take a look at our two normal maps. So this is the first one we did with just the viewport, and here is our bake. And you can see there's obvious difference in the colors, but they act the same way. So this one's a little bit darker, you can see, and softer than the bake. In the bake, you can see it's more sharp and it's brighter and more vivid colors. So I've tested each of these normal maps on the toilet paper, and there's not really that much difference. Maybe a slight difference in the numbers that you use for the strength, but other than that, you can use either one. I'll let you test it out for yourself. Okay, so back in our main blend file, we're back to our node setup here. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit and bring this texture up. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate that. And in this one, we're going to open up either one of these we can do. I'm just going to go ahead and do the proper one, the bake one. I say proper, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to do the bake one. And then if I take the color and plug it into the normal, you can see, ew, we're getting really wonky results. And if you remember from my last video, I say that the output and the input need to match the color in order for the best to have the best results. So right now we have a yellow color into a blue normal, which is not ideal. We want a yellow to yellow like this one, or a green to green like this one. So let's back this up a little bit here. And what we need here is to have some sort of translator from yellow to blue. And we can do that by Shift A and going to vector and adding in a normal map. And now we can hover it over and click, and now it connects it for us, the yellow to yellow and blue to blue. So we've got a color to color and normal to normal, and then all the calculation is done right in here. And remember, we use tangent space, so we want to keep that at tangent space here, which is the default. And you can start to see we have the bumpiness coming through. Now a strength of 1 is a little bit too much, so I'm going to bump this down. We'll try 0.5 here, so that's half. And yeah, that's starting to look pretty good there. That might still be too much, you can kind of see over here. So let's go half that, so 0.25. And yeah, so maybe something like that. Or maybe let's do 0.35. Yeah, something like that I think is good. And again, you need to play around with these values yourself. It's going to depend on your own 3D model. It's going to depend on your texture. But if I select my normal map node, just make sure that's the only one selected, and then press M to mute it or hide it. You can see if I go back and forth, you can see the difference that it's making there. Now, I notice one thing that I haven't done yet, and as I'm adjusting the strength, you can see the light changing. Now, this is not what we want. So we're actually using the wrong color space for this. If you look down here, we're using an RGB color space, and we don't actually want to use color for the color space in the display. So we want to change this to non-color, and now we have a lot smoother of result there. So let's change that back to 0.5 and see what we get. Okay, so that actually doesn't look too bad. Maybe that's too much. Maybe we'll change that to 0.4. But you don't really need this to be at a super high strength in order to get good results. So for example, if I bring that back down to 2.5, it kind of looks like we flattened that back out again. But if we do select this again and mute it, you can see the difference that it's having if I keep hitting M going back and forth. So and be careful if you hit M up here, it's just going to want to move to a new collection or some other dialog is going to pop up. Just make sure you're hovering your mouse over here to mute and unmute that. So I'm going to zoom in here. Yeah, so you don't really need that. I'm going to probably bump that up to 0.3, I think, though, or maybe 0.35. Yeah, I think that that's pretty good. And I might play around with that a little bit later, but this is now what we have. So actually, let's go ahead and go to our layout mode. And we are just viewing the normal right now. And the reason we see this is because in our shading tab, we have the normal map selected. So instead of this selected, we want to select this one. And whatever we have selected here is going to show up in our solid shaded mode because we have lighting as flat and texture. So that's whatever texture we have selected, it's going to show here. So let's go into our rendered mode, and now we can see our final result. Ta-da! And that just adds a touch of realism to it that you can't really get with just a flat surface. And if we select our light over here and rotate that around our object, you can see the lighting affecting those grooves and bumps in the surface of our toilet paper, which is cool. I have to kind of go slow because it's EV calculating that in real time, and so it doesn't really calculate it well as I move, but then when I stop, it's all right. Okay, so the next step is to now bake our lighting and our normal map together, kind of fuse it together into one image so that all we have to do is use one image, no lighting, to create the same illusion that we have here. So let's hop on over to the next one.